All right, it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We would like to welcome you to today's webinar on the Community Resiliency Model. This webinar is part of the monthly North Carolina AHEC Practice Support Services Lunch and Learn webinar series. A quick reminder for everyone to please mute themselves. There will be designated times during and after today's webinar for questions and comments. For now, we will hand it off to Jennifer Whitley and Casey Herrera.
Hey everybody, I'm gonna share my screen real quick. All right, so welcome to the Community Resiliency Model Workshop. My name is Casey Herrera, and I also have Jennifer Whitley with me, who will also be training. The Community Resiliency Model is also known as CRIM, so you'll hear us refer to it as CRIM throughout the training today as well. And it focuses on resiliency and well-being. And today we're going to take a brief look at this model. We will discuss our resilience zone, a little bit of the nervous system, and talk about several skills that will help us broaden our resiliency. Again, this is just a very brief overview of the community resiliency model. And if you are interested in bringing a more comprehensive workshop to your organization, then please feel free to reach out to CHEC, and we will be happy to get you set up with a workshop that fits your needs. And so as we get ready to start the workshop, I would like to invite you to think about some answers to one or more of these questions. What or who is helping you get through the most right now? What or who is giving you strength? And then what or who has helped you get through hard times in the past? And I'll just give you a few moments to think about your responses. And if you want to write them down, or if you would like to share them, you can. You don't have to. But you can share them in the chat box or feel free to unmute. And I'll just give you a few moments to think about those questions before we move on. Did anybody want to share? No? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move on.
Humans are resilient and have the capacity to heal after a trauma. CRIM defines resilience as the ability to identify and use individual and collective strengths to live fully in the present moment and to thrive while managing tasks of daily living. We have all seen resilient people get back on their feet after a fall and also use that experience to create meaning from their struggles that can transform their lives and the lives of people in their community. CRIM focuses on resiliency. When faced with a troubling behavior, conventional thinking asks, what is wrong with that person? A trauma-informed perspective recognizes the impact of trauma and on development and behavior, and it might ask the question, what happened to you? But a resiliency-focused perspective takes it a little bit further and asks, what are your strengths? What helps you get through hard times?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. There's buttons all over the screen. CRIM has been used across cultures, religions, and ethnicity. So when we help children and adults learn to tell the difference between sensations of distress and well-being, resiliency can expand by learning simple wellness skills. And the result is feeling greater balance in mind, body, and spirit. And this can be true for all over the world. The community resiliency model can be shared with individuals who have low literacy rate or with children who have not yet learned how to read or write. I know I use this on my 2.5-year-old all the time. Learning to read the nervous system is a human skill regardless of literacy level. And the community resiliency model can be used across the lifespan. A well-attuned parent can help to regulate the immature nervous system of infants, and children can learn the skills as well as adults. And just an interesting fact, the oldest person to learn these skills was 104. The core values embedded within the community resiliency model is service, social justice, dignity, respect, and the worth of every person, family, and community. And we believe when we practice resiliency skills that we can embody well-being and compassion to help provide resiliency and trauma-informed skills.
And as with anything, when we're learning something new, it's important that we have a common language so we're all on the same page. And so you heard Casey mention the resilient zone when she was giving you an introduction, and this really is one of the key components to CRIM. And the resilient zone, also known as the OK zone, is a state of well-being of our body, mind, and spirit. Notice that it's like a wave. There are times throughout the day where you have more stress and you might be a little amped up, and then others when you're more calm, or might be sleepy. Some people are morning people, and you get up in the morning, you have lots and lots of energy, and then other people, they might hit that afternoon slump. And so you see that in this diagram here. It's just the natural ebb and flow within your resilient zone. But regardless of where you are, if you're a little high or a little low, you're still able to handle your daily stresses because you're functioning as your best self. You might feel annoyed or angry, but you don't lose it. You can be sad, but not feel hopeless. You can manage the ups and downs of life when in the resilient zone. One of the major concepts of CRIM is to be able to recognize when you're in that resilient zone and also when you're not in the resilient zone. And we all have stressors, traumas, and even the reminder of stressors or traumas that can result in us being bumped out of our zone. When you're bumped into the high zone, you might be keyed up, hypervigilant, anxious, irritable, and so on. Conversely, when you're bumped into the low zone, you may feel disconnected, exhausted, numb, depressed, etc. Sometimes we can even fluctuate between the high zone and the low zone. It's human nature to get bumped into your high zone or low zone. That's all happened to us. I'm sure if you live in Wilmington, that's happened to you in 5 o'clock traffic at some point in time, or other situations that are more serious. When it becomes problematic is when we get stuck in that high zone or the low zone and can't return to the resilient zone. And the skills of CRIM that we're going to learn some of today will really help you to return to that resilient zone when you get bumped out.
So in CRIM, we're also learning about our nervous system, and we learn about the accelerator and the brake and the sensations connected to each part. So we can learn what we are feeling when we're distressed, energized, calm, or relaxed. And when we are learning that we're bringing awareness and attention to the sensations, when we're in distress, we can shift our attention to sensations connected to our well-being. So the automatic nervous system is considered largely involuntary, and the automatic nervous system includes the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So during times of stress or challenge, the sympathetic nervous system arouses and prepares the body for action. It directs the adrenal glands to release hormones, readying the body to take action. And the sympathetic nervous system causes the liver to provide extra sugar to the bloodstream in order to increase energy. It also increases breathing to provide added oxygen. And the sympathetic nervous system diverts blood from internal organs to the muscle, slowing digestion and suppressing the immune system. Along with increased heart rate and blood pressure, this gets the blood to the much needed muscles, and this makes it easier for the body to move and to move quickly. So the sympathetic nervous system also dilates the pupils, allowing in more light, and it increases salivation, but it decreases salivation, but increases perspiration in order to cool down the activated body. And CRIM uses observation and knowledge of patterns of nervous system to help people learn to distinguish between sensations of well-being and distress. Excuse me. Just as a car needs an accelerator and a brake, the body needs a counterpart to the sympathetic nervous system. So that sympathetic nervous system counterpart is known as the parasympathetic nervous system. which calms the body and prepares it for rest. So once the fight and flight response is successful, the rest and digest response takes over. And as the stress hormones slowly leave the bloodstream, the parasympathetic nervous system works to conserve energy and restore the body to a more balanced state. So it slows breathing, lowers digestion, lowers blood sugar, and decreases heart rate and blood pressure. And I'm sorry, it doesn't lower digestion, it increases digestion and immune functioning. And it constricts the pupils and increases salivation and decreases perspiration. As a result, the activated body becomes calm once again. So these two systems, the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, work together to maintain a steady, balanced internal state within the body. And the natural rhythm of charge and release corresponds to the rhythm of our resilient zone. And when we are in our resilient zone, our automatic nervous system is in rhythm. And when this is in rhythm and is working properly, we are in our best in handling the challenges we face. So in CRIM, we are trying to help people understand that many of the common reactions we experience in response to highly stressful or traumatic experiences are a result of how human beings are designed. So here's a list of common reactions someone may experience when they are stuck in either their high or low zone. So they may experience poor decisions or forgetfulness or tight muscles, physically, rapid breathing. Spiritually, they may lose faith or have an increase in faith. Emotionally, they could experience grief or shame, anxiety. In relationships, they could isolate themselves or become irritable or clingy. And then behaviorally, they could have tantrums, addictions, abusive behaviors, and those are just to name a few examples. There's also common reactions connected to well-being during and after a crisis, such as resilience, forgiveness, gratitude, wisdom, just to name a few. And transformative emotional and spiritual change can be experienced as a result of the struggle with highly challenging life situations. So many individuals report that there can be transforming growth after a traumatic event.
All right, so another key concept of CRIM is the idea of biology versus mental weakness. And so these common human reactions that Casey just went over to stressful and traumatic experiences affect the mind, body, and spirit. CRIM explains that these reactions are not weaknesses. They are because of how humans are designed. For example, when we experience distress, different organs within our body can be affected. We may not consciously recognize that our digestive issues are a result of reminders from past experience. But by understanding that, we learn about our biology and the response of our nervous system. We can learn how to track the associated sensations like those digestive responses. And then we can notice when we're bumped out of our resilient zone into the higher low zone. And then we can also have the skills to return to the resilient zone by resetting our nervous system. And neuroplasticity is a very big fancy word, which means that our brain is capable of changing in structure based upon life experiences. This is important because the millions of cells in our brains communicate with one another. And this communication ultimately results in all that we do, think, and feel. Neuroplasticity gives us hope because of our brain cells can rewire themselves in response to stimulation and new experiences. Neurogenesis means that our brains can create new neurons and connections between the neurons. So think about walking through a field that hasn't been attended in a while. And if you walk down that path one time, you're probably not going to create much of a difference in that field. But if you walk that same path repeatedly, then you're going to start to create a pathway. And our brains work the same way. So the more often you use skills, the more you're going to create that pathway between your neurons. And so there's two main principles here. The first is that brain cells that will fire together wire together, and the other is use it or lose it. So brain cells that fire together wire together means that when brain cells fire together, strong pathways form and communication is quick. So like walking that path in the field. Um, the stronger the pathway, the quicker the response will be. Practice makes for stronger and quicker neural pathways. Conversely, the use it or lose it principle means that if brain cells stop firing together, the pathways are weakened and can be pruned away. So think about that field again. If you stop walking it, then it will grow back up and there won't be a path there anymore. So another example of this is learning a foreign language. I know I learned Spanish in high school and college, but I haven't used it since. And so I could probably string together a few words or phrases, but that's about it. So when we don't use something, we lose it and our brains forget it. So this is the same concept. And this is important because if we learn skills to enhance our resilience, we're taking advantage of the fire together, wire together principle. The more we practice the skills, the easier and more automatic our resiliency responses become. Likewise, as we develop more resilient responses to stress and trauma, the less likely our brain will be to choose those responses that interfere with our everyday experiences. For example, I can learn skills to intercept my tendency to avoid every intersection after a car accident and instead use the CRIM skills until the tendency to avoid those intersections gets weaker and could even disappear. That is neuroplasticity. We can build new, more resilient pathways.
So now that we've discussed a little bit about the resilience zone and learned some basic understandings of CRIM, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the skills. And there are 6 skills in CRIM. There's tracking, resourcing, grounding, gesturing, help now, and shift and stay. So today we're going to learn about tracking, resourcing, and grounding. And these are called the basic 3. These are the fundamental skills of CRIM. And we'll also take a brief look at the help now skills. So our first skill is tracking, and tracking is most important for you for self-care. As you are learning the skills, we're going to invite you to pay attention to what is happening on the inside. So you can ask yourself questions like, what am I aware of on the inside when I think about something pleasant? And tracking is a key skill of CRIM. So if we aren't tracking, then we aren't doing CRIM. And tracking is the foundation for helping stabilize the nervous system. When we are tracking, we are reading the nervous system and paying attention to sensations of well-being. And when we notice those sensations, we notice what is happening in the body at that moment. So for example, when you're excited, you might notice an increase in your heart rate or tingling or faster breathing. And conversely, when you feel calm, you might notice a release of tensions in your muscles or warmth in your chest, and you may even take a deep breath. So just paying attention to those physical sensations is tracking. And when we're reading the nervous system and paying attention to sensations of well-being, we can begin to change the way we walk in the world. So just to share a metaphor that can be helpful and important in understanding how to read the nervous system and drawing attention to our well-being or chasing our resiliency. So do you have a garden, or do you grow fruits, vegetables, and plant flowers? And are there weeds in your garden? And what would happen if you decided to only water the weeds in your garden? But what would happen if you only watered the fruits or vegetables or flowers in your garden? So the moral of the story here is when we water the fruits or the flowers and the vegetables in our garden, it's like paying attention to the well-being that exists within our body. And the more we water or pay attention by reading sensations connected to our well-being, the more they grow and expand. And the weeds are still there, but they're not as prominent. And we don't want to forget the weeds are there, but at the same time, we don't want the weeds to be the only thing that we water, because they will take over our garden. And when we learn to read our nervous system, we can have a choice as to what we pay attention to, whether it's distress or well-being. And we encourage you to chase your well-being. So as we've discussed, sensations refer to physical experiences in the body, and every thought and emotion has corresponding body sensations. And by paying attention to those sensations, a person can have greater awareness of emotions and thoughts. We have statements in our culture like, I feel blue and I just saw red, when describing emotions like sadness and anger. So these statements show that emotions arrive from felt sensations. As you can see in this image, excuse me, my mind just went blank. In this image, the yellow shows regions of sensations where the sensation has increased, and then the blue represents decreased feeling of sensation. So someone who's feeling angry may feel an increase of sensation in their upper body. Conversely, someone who feels depression may feel a decrease of sensations in their limbs.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for a minute. All right, so the second skill of CRIM is resourcing, and the best way to first learn tracking is through identifying a personal resource and tracking the sensations connected to that resource. And a resource can be a person, a place, a thing, a memory, a part of yourself, and these are things that make you feel calm, peace, joy, etc. It can be something that's real or something that's imagined, and it can be internal or external. When we identify a resource, it's important that we expand upon the resource in order to build new neural pathways. For example, if your resource is the beach, you want to paint a mental picture of that beach. Think of a specific beach, a specific time that you were there. What were the sights, the sounds, the smells, the textures? Is it sunny or cloudy, warm or cool, windy or still? How does the sand feel under your feet? Can you hear the waves crashing and the birds squawking? Can you smell the salt air? Resourcing is a strength building skill and can develop our internal resiliency and a renewed sense of our ability and capacity to stabilize our nervous systems. So I'm going to give you guys just a couple minutes, and I'm going to invite you to take a moment to think about a personal resource. Remember, this can be real or imagined, internal or external, person, place, thing, memory that generates feelings of peace, calm, joy. And once you have that resource, think of at least 3 characteristics about that resource. And I also want to caution you that sometimes resources can generate unpleasant sensations as well. For example, if my resource is baking cookies with my grandmother who's now passed, I might experience conflicting sensations. If this happens to you, try to focus on the pleasant sensations. But if you find that too difficult, you may like to develop an alternative resource. So as you think about your resource and the supporting characteristics, pay attention to the sensations you may be experiencing while focusing on your resource. What do you notice on the inside and where? Take a moment to focus on the sensations that are pleasant or neutral. And if anyone would like to share their resource, again, you're not obligated to share, but if you would like to share, you can unmute and share with the group, or you can type in the chat box.
I think we'll go ahead to the next skill since we're getting close on time here. So our next skill is grounding. And grounding refers to the relationship between a person's body in the present moment. So when we are anxious, we often focus on something that has happened in our past or something that has happened in the future. However, by bringing our attention to the present moment, literally to the parts of our body making contact with the supportive surface, we can communicate a greater sense of safety to our nervous system. And there are many different ways to ground. You can ground by standing, sitting, laying down. You can even ground when you're floating in water just by paying attention to the support of the water holding your body up. And you can also ground by being aware of your hands, feet, or another part of your body making contact with a surface. And it's just important to be aware that not everybody is comfortable grounding in the same position. For example, someone of a shorter stature may not feel comfortable grounding while sitting in a chair where their feet can't touch the ground. So when you do ground, just make sure that you get in a position that's comfortable for you. And finally, make sure while you're grounding that you track the sensations that are supportive and safer in the present moment. And we were going to do a grounding exercise, but I don't know that we have time. So we'll go ahead and Jennifer's going to go over the last skill for us.
Okay, so help now is the last skill we're going to talk about today. And this is just a really quick thing that you can do to bring down the activation within the nervous system when you're stuck in your high or low zones. And so the different skills of help now are to drink a glass of water, juice, or tea. You can notice the temperature, how far down you can feel it go in your digestive tract. You can look around the room wherever you are, noticing anything that catches your attention. Name 6 colors you can see, whether you're inside or outside. If your eyes have a tendency to shut, you can open them wide. You can walk around and count backwards from 20. Touch things around you, noticing the texture. Is it hard or soft, smooth or rough? Notice the temperature in the room or outside. Is it warm or cold or comfortable? Notice the sounds around you. Walk and pay attention to the movement in your arms and legs and how your feet are making contact with the ground. Push your hands against the wall or door frame and notice your muscles pushing, or you can even push your back against the wall while you're facing outward. So these are just 10 strategies to refocus a person's attention on something other than the distress that they're experiencing when they're in the high or low zone. And these strategies can activate other parts of the body and brain and help the person come back into balance when they're bumped out of their resilient zone. For example, slowly pushing against a wall using the strength of the large muscles of the body helps to regulate the nervous system. These strategies can also be used conversationally to help others get back into the resilient zone. All right, so we've covered quite a bit in a very short time. We covered several of the CRIM skills. You can use tracking, which is the first skill we talked about, to identify the sensations of distress that might be present when you're bumped out of your resilient zone. And then you can use that knowledge to make a conscious shift to using a skill of either resourcing, grounding, or help now to return to your resilient zone.
And then just to share with you guys, CRIM does have an app. It's called iChill, and it is free. It's for Android and Apple. And it also has a Spanish version. So there's like a brief overview of CRIM, and then there's also an option to click on the skills, and it'll walk you through step by step of how to do each skill. And then if you would like to connect on social media, those are the pages. And then we'll open it up to any questions. Again, I do know that was super quick and super brief. That was just a very snip of what CRIM is. But as we mentioned, if anyone is interested in bringing this to your organization, then feel free to reach out to myself or Jennifer, and we'd be happy to get you guys set up. But